Welcome back to the Frontier Faith Podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jeff.
And we are here with the one and only legendary Penny Hollingsworth. And you have been a huge inspiration for why we even wanted to have this podcast, because God has been at work through you and your family for so long. And so this is a very, very special time. Penny, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting up with me.
This is a treat. So we'd love to hear from you, how your origins, some of your life story, and so where did you come from, Penny, and when did you start following Christ?
Okay, I came from Kansas. I was born in Kansas, Wellington, Kansas. It's close to the Oklahoma border, and that's where my grandparents lived, and that's where my mother and dad were raised. And during World War, and we were a block from the railroad tracks, so during World War II, we had lots of trains going through, and my father was sent out to California in the service, and so the family moved out there. My brother and I had a brother who's no longer living, but a younger brother, 18 months younger than I. Poor kid. It's bad when the girl's the oldest and you're that close. Anyway, so we went to California. My earliest life was California, the beach. We were in Manhattan Beach, and you had to be careful. I remember folks saying, don't go near any crowds, because that's usually when they were bringing somebody in that had drowned, and they didn't want me to get mixed up in that situation. But we lived on a sand hill, the house that we lived in after my dad got out of the service. And the sand fleas, I remember as a kid, the sand fleas, you little kids playing outside, and you bring the sand in the house on your clothes, and then sand fleas are jumping on your legs from the rugs. That was something else.
Wow.
We were there during World War II. We heard Kate Smith when she sang God Bless America the first time, all gathered around, the troops.
Oh, wow.
During World War II. It was beautiful.
Wow.
But everybody listening. And I can remember going to a quilting thing with my mother where we were making quilts for troops. And I didn't know how to sew, and I didn't know. I was little. I was in kindergarten and first grade, and sewed the quilt and sewed it to the pinafore dress I had on. So we had to cut it all apart. First time I ever did it, because I didn't know, never done it. So remember that. I had a Japanese boy in my class at school. And I remember when they took him and his family to one of these intern camps during World War II. So that's how old I am. I mean, I remember the day the war was over, because the highway behind our house, right down the hill from where we were on, had a McDonnell aircraft factory down the road, and all the cars were coming by bumper to bumper. Everybody's so happy the war's over.
Wow.
Yeah.
1945, and yelling and screaming and happy. It was just wonderful.
Wow.
Just wonderful. But I lived in a lot of places in California, because my dad never stayed in a job very long. He always was changing. So we lived Santa Monica and Manhattan Beach and all kinds of places. And I was little in California. And then we moved to New Mexico, lived in New Mexico.
Right. Wow.
Along the Clonks, and lived in Texas. I lived in Amarillo, Texas, and went to school there twice in my lifetime, plus Slayton, Texas, plus Sunset later in Lubbock.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah, so I lived in Lubbock. But my folks ended up with a divorce. My dad was an alcoholic, and we had gone home on vacation from Texas, and he came into my grandparents' house and just was in terrible condition. And I was upstairs asleep, and I heard the noise and knew it was one of my dreams through my childhood, that I'd wake up and he'd be, out of control, basically. Wow. So it just...
How old were you when that happened?
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
I was probably, I guess, the third grade.
Okay. Yeah.
Third grade, and I asked from the stairway if I should call the police, because we had company. My grandparents had company, and this was in their house. Their best friends were there, and they came and got him, and that was the end of that.
Wow.
But during my lifetime, when I lived in Texas and before all that happened, even I would go from Texas to Kansas on a train by myself.
Wow.
Didn't have to have, they just tell the porter, I'm getting off Wellington, they'll pick me up there, and I would get off the train
Wow.
by myself.
Third grade?
And I loved the trains, yeah.
While you were in third grade,
Yeah,
that young?
it was before that. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Different world.
Yeah, and in Texas, when my mom always worked because my dad always was changing jobs and things, she always worked and was a great cook and worked and took care of us. And I would ride the buses in Amarillo as a little kid by myself. I learned how to do that and go roller skating on Saturday. That was my big deal,
Wow.
to go to the.
I don't think we can do that now.
So we ended up at my grandparents' house after they got a divorce.
Okay.
I just lived there, went to school in Kansas, loved it. Great. Couldn't have lived in a nicer town for children. Halloween, I could do trick or treat all by myself, clear across town, and nobody worried about anybody, about your children. You were safe.
Wow.
It was wonderful, a wonderful time. And they had 2 18-hole golf courses, plus the swimming pool in my hometown.
Wow.
So that was great. And I was raised in the Methodist church. They were Methodist, but my grandmother had actually been a preacher's daughter, and I didn't know that until later. She read her Bible every day.
Oh, wow.
And they were just wonderful. And my grandfather was a photographer, had his studio downtown, and so he had pictures in the church building of the kids in the in the second grade class and the third grade class, and all this on the walls of the church building there, And so I was active in the Methodist church growing up. It was and we learned scriptures, and we had great teachers, and I've always been thankful for that. I've been thankful for anybody that told me in Texas, anybody that told me about God. It meant so much to me, even though I didn't realize it because I was so young.
Sure.
But I can remember living in Pantex Village, was one of these in Texas outside of Amarillo. You didn't have regular our houses were like plywood shacks, basically. No windows. They had openings with screens and the board would come up, and you put the board across to hold that, during the things. And we lived there. We'd get on the bus at 5:00 in the morning and go into Amarillo School to go to school. And I went to second grade, third grade, fourth grade in that area at different times.
Wow.
We'd go and come. But I had a lot of freedom. But I remember a little 12-year-old girl, and I told this to our students in Thailand one time. They were asking me, a 12-year-old girl, and the sign says she's going to teach a Bible class in our little village compound thing there. And I was so excited to go. I probably was fourth grade then, fourth or fifth grade. I was really excited about it. And she came and she taught a class. She brought her book, taught the class, and that was just one of the great highlights of my childhood in Amarillo. And for some reason, our Thai preachers, our Thai students, when they were back this last year and all, they talked to me after Loren had died. They asked to talk, And I had mentioned that, and they were that really got their attention for some reason, how children can do so much,
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it means so much to little children.
Wow.
And so that was just one, and it surprised me. I was just telling about my life and being excited about that girl coming and having a Bible class on a Sunday morning, because otherwise we wouldn't have had a Bible class in that particular situation that year.
Well, that's powerful.
It was amazing. It really was.
Wow.
But I went to school in Amarillo schools. A couple of times we lived there, we'd move somewhere else and we'd come back. They had semester exams. Now, this was coming from California, and And they were far ahead of the California schools, and I believe that they still are. Because I've met, in the school system several times when people would come in from California and they were already behind in Texas or Kansas schools, and they'd have to play catch up.
Wow.
And that's what I did when I was in school and came from California. I had a wonderful teacher in the second grade, so I didn't know anything of what the kids were doing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it was
So
it's
you were-
part of my lifetime anyway. So I stayed in Wellington. I ended up working in the courthouse when I graduated. I worked in the welfare office and did I was shorthand and stuff for the teachers, for the people that did the welfare
Okay.
things, And that's where I met Loren. Loren was from a little town outside of my hometown. I didn't know him until I guess it was my junior year, and he was his freshman year at Wichita University. He
Okay.
was on a football scholarship.
Oh. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he and my best friend, one of my best friends from our school, we'd gone up to see one of our other kids that had already graduated playing basketball for the Wichita basketball team, and they were all in the athletic dorm. The athletes were all in the same dorm. So during halftime, these boys came over and said hello to us. We'd gone up to see our friend play. And that's the first time I ever saw him, Penny. And never did see him. And I was a junior. He came back to a basketball game one time, and we had one and was there. And one of my friends didn't have a car, so he wanted Loren. Loren had his dad's car, so he wanted Loren to take him and his girlfriend, and I some way or other I ended up, because that kid was my friend, ended up in the car with him, and that's the first time we ever met,
Wow.
actually, other than the basketball game.
Wow.
And then I never did see him. He was in and out of my life, hello and goodbye, because he was always doing something. Always. But he was raised in the church. His dad was an elder in their little church.
Okay.
He came from a little town where they parked the cars in the middle of the street. I have a picture of horse and buggies in his town at one time.
Wow.
And it was a tiny town, just one block each way. They had kind of a square. And he helped his dad. His dad worked at Boeing in Kansas, made the airplanes before Boeing moved out west, and Loren did the farming. His older brother graduated from Kansas University as a pharmacist, and his younger brother ended up going to KU as pharmacist. They both majored in pharmacy. Loren went to Wichita one year and quit. And so he didn't like school.
Wow. So I'm done.
And so then I don't know. And I taught swimming summertime in swimming pool and all. So we didn't really know each other, and just occasionally would see him in town or something like that, for a while, because he was always coming and going, working and coming. And so I don't know how God had a purpose for us, and I could see it so many times. He put us together probably because of he knew our lives and what, we had both had some experiences. He would go and travel and come back home and work. And
so did you guys become a Christian after you and Loren got together?
And I was baptized. I was going to say I was baptized because in the Methodist church, you're sprinkled. And I always thought I was a Christian. And even when we were dating, I thought I was saved. I was a Christian, and he could. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but he always knew, and he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot, even as we were dating. One time he got after me because I'd picked up one of these words that young kids pick up in school. There wasn't. It was something, and he said, "You can't say that," and I said. Yeah, because I had taken the Lord's name in vain, but it was one of these things that was going around. And I didn't realize it, and he really jumped on me. We were on a date. He said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Who are you to tell me? Look at your life."
Oh, boy.
As a football player, because he was no angel either.
Nice.
Which reminds me nowadays of that song that says, he isn't perfect, and I mentioned it, and I don't know if people understood that, but he's perfect for me. We learned a lot, and he taught me a lot. I learned a lot of, of Bible, and he taught me a lot, even though I thought I knew a lot of Bible. But I wasn't baptized until we were in the military. At Fort Bragg, I was baptized in North Carolina.
So after you guys got married, you then got baptized?
We were married in 1957. I graduated from high school in 56, went to college one year, and then we got married.
57. Okay.
And that's when he wanted to go to Africa and South or North, wherever he wanted to go.
Everywhere.
He wanted to go
to see the world.
everywhere. And so he went to Colorado. We had gotten married, and he went to Colorado to stay with my aunt and uncle and see if he could get a job in Denver. And they advised him because of the draft, to get in the military. So he came home from visiting my aunt and uncle and says, "We're going in the military." And that's what we did,
And that's what you did.
That's what we did.
Wow.
And so we went into the military, and I was trying to think. And I visited him a couple times because he was at Fort Leonard in Missouri. Went over on a weekend one time with his younger brother, went with me, and we went over and visited him. And then when we got out of there, we got sent to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and he went through jump school. And that's back during the time when, and I was trying to think. I guess, I was pregnant. I was 7 months pregnant when he got sent to Fort Bragg, and when I went, I flew in the old planes. The old planes with just the propellers, and everybody got sick. And I'm praying.
You're 7 months
I
pregnant.
do not. When this one man would walk by me on the aisle, I was just praying I wouldn't get sick. I didn't want to get sick on this airplane. But anyway, he had gotten sent to Germany already, so I was getting ready to go to Germany. And so excited. We were both excited about being able to go to Germany. And so I got on a plane in Kansas and went to New York, and went from there, went to Germany.
You fly or boat?
Flying. And I got to fly in a helicopter in New York because we had to transfer the two airports.
Wow.
And that was free. I didn't have to pay for it.
Oh, fun.
Wow.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Wow.
I enjoyed that. But I went all by myself. My folks took me to the airport, got on a plane.
And 7 months pregnant with your first child?
With my first child.
Okay.
So we got to Germany. And fortunately, he was there because a lot of times in special forces and in Germany, he was in the field a lot and doing things, and went different countries as he went through there, as he got his thing. When he first got there, he didn't have a stripe yet, so we couldn't live on base. So I lived in a German farmhouse, and they didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak any German.
Wow.
And he picked me up at the hospital, brought me home with the baby, and the people could hear the baby crying. So they came down to the house, and they were going to give her her pacifier. But I knew they didn't sterilize. And of course, in the military hospital where I had her, everything's sterilized, and they're training with all this. I had no experience with babies or anything.
Sure.
We had to go by ambulance from where we were in Bad Tolz, Germany, to Munich to have the baby. And and then he got sent. He brought me home from the hospital, and then he got sent back to the field. He was out in the field, and so I was there with the Germans, and their house had the barn right next door. We had one bedroom. Little bedroom with a little 2 what do you call those little stove camps, like camp stoves, 2 burner thing, and a little sink that was like a bathroom sink, a little tiny. That's all we had in our beds in that room.
Wow.
You know, and I couldn't talk to them, but the barn and the animals was just 2 doors down. So I had the cows right there, and
Wow.
and the Germans, they lived upstairs, and they took a bath once a week. Saturday night, they would take their bath and then put on their lederhosen and get all dressed up, and they'd be all dressed up all day Sunday, and then back to work, the farm, and I would walk into the Kaserns, what we called it in German, you know, walk into there to get groceries or whatever and carry my baby, go in and come back.
Wow.
Until he went through the academy then and got a stripe, so we had quarters then. And the first quarters we had, we lived in the maids' quarters. It was the 4th floor of the apartment buildings that we were in, and that was something because I had 8 bedrooms all of a sudden. I'd gone from 1 bedroom to 8 bedrooms because I was in the maids' quarters that was upstairs. That was the only ones they had free at the moment until we got downstairs. So that was interesting, but that was great. I could hang diapers on rods in the house against the heater and dry the baby's
thing.
I think
it's fascinating that your earliest memories in your early childhood is shaped by World War II, and then your early part of your marriage is shaped by military experience and in Germany.
And we were excited to go to Germany.
Wow.
And like Loren said, you know, it's so much when you're studying that in grade school, you know, oh, that's interesting, but it's not the same as when you get to go.
Be there.
And we were in one of Hitler's, in Germany, where we lived outside in a farm to start with, was one of his places where he had his special troops, and we had a swimming pool, indoor swimming pool there, and that Kaserne, as they called it, with the military there, you know, and they had an archway in their building, in their highways. You come into town, that they asked General Patton was bringing his troops through there in World War II, and they begged him not to destroy, with the tanks, to destroy that arch, and he didn't. He went around. And so he was very well thought of in that in that town. And my kids, Rhonda, then I had second child born there in the military hospital too. First 2 girls were born there. And she went back. She and her husband and the kids went back. All their kids went back and saw all that and everything.
Wow.
Yeah. It was nice that they got to. We loved Germany. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Got to travel. We went to Italy and, you know, all over.
All that.
France. Yeah. We went all over. Yeah. While we were there.
How long were you guys in the military?
We were there. Well, we were in the military 8 years, and then Loren got out. But we were there in Germany 3.5 years.
Okay.
And at the time, we had escape routes to get out because the Berlin Wall, and they still had all that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful country, and we got to go down the French River and go a lot of places on vacation.
I remember Loren talking about how he learned a decent amount, of not quite a bit of German during that time. But then when he started learning Thai, it just blew away all the German.
That's right. That's right.
Forgot it?
That's true.
Like he forgot it? Like,
it just took up too much space.
Gotta delete
Thai.
some
Storage.
Well, actually, when we came back from Germany, he was in what they call it. We just came back from overseas. He had to stay out on base. He couldn't even come home where we lived, where the kids and I lived at that moment, because he was taking Spanish all day long, every day for 6 weeks to jump into Cuba, because that's when they had the Cuba rising thing. And they called that off. I was getting ready to take the kids and go to Kansas. They called that off just right before they were ready to leave to go into Cuba.
Yeah,
which I was sure thankful.
Yeah, Loren was like locked and loaded, ready to go to Cuba, right? Like day of, like he was gonna be part of the first wave of things, and then
and he learned. He was going through all that Spanish then, but he forgot all that.
Wow.
So we had a wonderful military life, though.
Yeah. So, military life, and then missionaries in Thailand for 51 years. How did you transition to that?
Well, we went home to farm after we went 8 years. And why he got out of the service, he got out for the kids, I'm sure, because he knew the way he liked to live, he would have been gone.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids, wouldn't be raising the kids like they needed to be raised. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't always be there to go. And I was faithful in going to church the whole time he was gone. All the time when he was in Vietnam, I took the kids and went. And so when we went home, he decided he would go home and farm with the folks that he was getting out of the service, which was a shock to me. I really didn't think he'd ever get out. He loved doing everything that he did. He did a lot of things when he was in the military. And so we went home and farmed 5 years. We had pigs, and the kids and Loren would be out in the pig pen in the middle of the night watching the sows have their babies. We had one that had 14 little ones. And but I had Troy at that time. I had a son by then, and I was in the house. And so we went. And he was working on the railroad too, because farming doesn't make enough money to pay for the farm and do the, all that, everything, even with these folks. So, and he wanted to do more with the church, with the teaching and stuff.
And this is where you said?
This was in Kansas.
Kansas.
Plain, this was his little town outside, 11 miles from where I grew up.
And there was a 5-year time between Special Forces Vietnam and then getting to Thailand. There's this 5-year window in Kansas.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we went. So Ed Horton from Sunset came and held a meeting at the church too. And Loren was wanting to teach there. It was a small congregation, and he was wanting to teach, but on the railroad you have to go when you're called.
Okay.
So the phone rang, and he would have to take the train and go down to Oklahoma and come back, what they were doing. So he decided that he'd go to school and get some more Bible training, which I was thankful for because he had a pretty wild, crazy life, even though he, had been raised in the church and everything, and he needed more Bible training, even though he knew a lot too. He had a good memory, and he knew a lot, but he needed to be able to present it to and teach.
Right.
So Ed Horton came and held a meeting, and we found out, and we thought, well, 4 kids, you can't go to a school somewhere, but we found out we could with the military GI Bill.
Okay.
Wow, the GI Bill sent him to Sunset?
That's the reason we couldn't have gone without the GI Bill.
Wow.
Yeah, we couldn't have. And so so we went to Sunset.
It was Ed Wharton's fault, huh?
Ed Wharton, yeah. I love Ed.
Yeah, we love Ed too.
Yeah.
So
how fantastic. I'd never heard anybody preach like Ed until he got there, yes.
So
I loved it.
How old were you and Loren when you guys concluded, Vietnam and Kansas and moved to Sunset? How old were you guys when you moved to Sunset?
We were probably, that's a good question. We had, by then we had 4 kids. So, I was 19 when I got married, and then we had and Loren was 20 when we entered the thing. So it was like 8 years and 13 years probably. So I think we were in our 34, something like that in there.
Wow.
At Sunset when we went. And we loved it. I always said if I retired, I'd retire to Lubbock, and people look at me and say, Lubbock? Because when we were there, it was a dust bowl, and not many trees, but the people were great.
Yeah.
The studying was great.
Hasn't changed much. Dusty, not very many trees, but the people are
great people.
People are wonderful. Yes. And of course, Lubbock Christian was there, so my kids came back to Lubbock Christian to college, except that my son, he wanted to be an engineer. He's a mechanical engineer. So he couldn't take that at Lubbock Christian. They didn't offer that. He had to change to Tech or to A&M, so he ended up going to Texas A&M and graduating from there.
Wow.
but the girls all, and my son-in-law graduated from Lava Christian as a preacher, and he preaches in Cambodia now. And they're in Cambodia, and Julie's in Cambodia, my oldest. And
so you're at preaching school in Lubbock, and then how did Thailand become the path?
That's Parker Henderson came, and several, Tommy Allison in Denver City, and several of them were homecoming, came back to Sunset for homecoming, and they were teaching and preaching. They were talking about Thailand. So Loren decided that sounded really good. We'd try to go to Thailand. And a friend of ours wanted to go too. Well, you have to raise money because we didn't have any money to go anywhere, you know. And Loren got the money and so we could go to Thailand with the 4 kids. And the other young couple that were our friends, they never could raise the support. He just kept getting turned down. So that wasn't God's purpose for him at that time.
So you guys still went, even though your friends weren't able to go with you?
Yeah, we just went. Yeah, we went to Thailand.
How did you feel about Thailand?
Going.
Yeah, initially, the idea.
Initially,
when Loren
it
said,
was all a new experience. You know, everything's always new with him. Always. And we were blessed when we went to Thailand because the church in Bangkok, there were missionaries. There were a lot of missionaries back in Thailand, in that period that we went, different groups in different places and stuff like that. But we had some wonderful missionary friends.
Wow.
In fact, the first house that we stayed when we moved in, they gave us their bedroom. There's 6 of us, so we had their bed and our 4 kids on mats on the floor, and they took their daughter's bedroom, which was like a closet. It was so tiny.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would take me around to look for a house to live in. And I had no idea. It took us 6 weeks to find a house that we could rent and live in. And that time they're sleeping in their own house, you know. But we had maids in Thailand, which was a blessing.
Yeah,
it was really,
I bet.
It was really nice to have a maid when you get there because you didn't know anything.
Sure.
And you have to have somebody at your house all the time. We had walls and we had keys to the gates and everything because of thieves. I mean, because they come over the fence and they get in your house when you're sleeping. It's just, and they deliver your electric bills and water bills and all your bills to your gate. And if nobody's in the house, then you have to go to wherever their big company is to get your bill and pay it. So you always have a maid at your house. Somebody's always there all the time. Wow. And they had maids' quarters outside the house, and they had their kitchen or whatever outside the house.
Yeah.
So, but it was nice because people would visit us in Bangkok, and I could take them all over the city once I learned how to drive in Bangkok.
Yeah.
And come home to a prepared meal. I didn't have to worry about it. So, you know, I could bring the visitors and they could stay with us. And
that's amazing.
And it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was. And it was a blessing.
Wow.
Because the kids are in school. Our 4 kids then went to the international school. They had to have uniforms.
Okay.
And they were 2 weeks late getting into the school. And one teacher just really scolded my second daughter, Rhonda, just terrible because she didn't have a uniform, even though we were having a maid, you know, and it had just arrived. And on top of that, Rhonda had got epilepsy as we were raising money to go to Thailand.
Wow.
And so we had to go through, I mean, we were coming home from raising money at a church when she had her first seizure.
Wow.
So we were going through that as we're moving out of our house, and I'd asked the doctor, can we go to Thailand? Because we'd already made all those arrangements. And he said, yeah, they have doctors in Thailand. So we went to Thailand, but she had a tough time in those early years, tougher than I realized. because she said later, she didn't know that first year in particular at the international school and how she felt and everything. She was just ready to die. She didn't know that she was going to get through all the seizures and all the medicine and all that.
Wow.
But we never, she did wonderful. She played sports in school, everything. We never kept it a secret from anybody. She has this. Yeah. She's taking medicine, and she's still playing. And the first time she went to Hong Kong, I think, with the kids to play at a basketball tournament, and came home. She came off the airplane on a wheelchair because she'd had a seizure on the airplane. Wow. But we managed to get through all that. She managed to get through that through the school, but there were lots of challenges, but we had wonderful missionary friends that helped us get settled.
Yeah.
And Loren loved, they had a school, preaching school at the time, and Loren loved the teaching, and they loved him. So, it just kind of grew from there.
Was that the primary starting point? I know 51 years is a lot.
In Bangkok, and it's a church in Bangkok, and they're still there. In fact, the man that preached here Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
They just came from that congregation. I said, that's where we started. They had a preaching school there. Yeah.
Wow.
In Thailand with that bunch. And the kids that the preacher there right now that they knew and liked, and his wife and all, his dad was the one that Loren had quoted so many times that was learning and preparing to be an elder when we first got there. He said, and he became an elder of that church. But now he's with another church up north because their family had moved because of things. So those kids grew up, it's just interesting to see how God works all that out.
How quickly adapted did you guys become to the language and the culture there?
The language is... You have to know the language if you're really going to understand the culture and the people, And we studied 9 months, 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. And Loren and they don't put wives and husbands together because, it'll be easier for one than it will be the other. Very seldom is it the same, the ability, And so that particular school had learned, to separate husbands and wives, and had learned to
interesting.
And they changed their whole system, so they had a really good teaching system when we were there. And a lot of denomination people were there and everything, and it was very interesting. But when we get out of language school, I'd be exhausted after 4 hours. And Loren would be in the car trying to talk to me in Thai. I could hear their classroom laughing because somebody had said something silly, And I'd tell him, I said, do not speak one more word to me in Thai today. I don't want to.
I need English.
Yes.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I was worn out, wiped out. But it was good. It was really good. And I'm so thankful. And we told our kids, with the 2 girls and all that are working in Cambodia, when they went, you've got to learn the language. If you're going to know the people and understand the culture and everything, you've got to be able to understand them.
Did you feel like by the end of that 9 months, you felt like you had a good grasp?
I felt like I could understand a little bit.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of living with them and using it.
Thai is I think one of the most difficult languages to learn.
I've heard that,
with the tones, it's really difficult.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
I was only there for 2 weeks, and me and Steve Cannon, we tried really hard to learn the language. We put a lot of work in, only 2 weeks, and it's definitely not Spanish. Oh, man.
You guys were fabulous. They got off the airplane trying to speak Thai. I could not believe it. And somebody had been sitting... God put somebody in your row on the airplane that was Thai.
Yeah, Thai and also bilingual, and we were able to speak. And they had an in-flight tutor instead of.
You had a short course on the way. Wow.
Crash course instead of in-flight entertainment on Thai, and that was a great trip.
And then Lauren was teaching when they came in, so one of the brothers took me to the airport to pick them up. So I went to pick them up, and so they get off the airplane speaking their Thai.
Their Thai.
Their Thai.
Attempted Thai.
Yeah.
It was so inspiring. I mean, really, that somebody, they had all this on their phone, wasn't it? A phone,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
and a notebook and
and putting. Oh, mercy!
It was yes, writing things out phonetically because the alphabet is different. It was great. It was a great time though.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great though. It was great to have him, and the Thais still talk about him and love to have him come back too, because they was. Nobody gets off the airplane speaking Thai that's never had Thai. Nobody.
Well, it's amazing to hear. So, like, I've known you guys just for much shorter time than most people at the Valley, just because we came up just a couple years ago, and I've known of you guys. I know of Loren. I remember Loren and John Kaufman taught a class together in Anchorage years ago when I was in high school, and got to hear his teaching then, but heard more like legend stories from Mike and others, but having that adventurous spirit, that military grit and discipline, that Loren, see his faith going over there, but seeing your faith particularly as a mother of four children total, yeah. I mean, what was that like raising children in Thailand?
The international school was such a blessing.
Yeah.
And having a maid helped tremendously, of course, as far as home, because she could go to the market and do the cooking. But I became a mother just like I would here. I would pick the kids up at school and their friends and take their friends home or something. And I worked at the school in the athletic department because I could help with my kids all playing sports. I could help raise money because they got to go to Hong Kong, they got to go to Malaysia, they got to go to Singapore, and they got to go to Jakarta because I had to write in the beginning. I had to type letters to American businesses and things asking if they would help support the students for their airplane ticket. Because they didn't have to pay for their own tickets, that we raised the money for their tickets, and then we would put the logo of the company or business on their jackets so that they would advertise for that contribution to them. And so, I would work with the Thai secretary and work with the embassies to make sure that every student who was going had a passport and could be allowed to enter the country. We had some countries that the kids one of the girls on the basketball team, that country refused. She was Israeli, and they refused to let her come into that country. So we had to be really careful with all the visas and all the passports, that everybody was recognized and had their visa and all. Otherwise, they couldn't go with the teams. But it was a wonderful experience. My third daughter played when she went to Hong Kong for the Christmas basketball tournament. They had 4 girls who were sleeping together, and they always slept in other people's homes, And in Hong Kong, in particular, they slept on it was like a bunk bed, but there's no mattresses. They're just sleeping on the wood. And there was 4 of our girls, Kim and her 3 friends, and that family had company that week. It was Christmas time. They slept on their kitchen floor while our kids were there for that tournament. And my daughter said that was one of the best times she ever had. And she, in that tournament. And the next year that they went to that Christmas tournament, that lady could not keep them that year, but she came and got my daughter and took my daughter and me out to eat. And she had rented a taxi to take the 4 kids there that time up the peak, so they'd get to see it when they were in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong's so expensive; it's unbelievable. they just had so many wonderful experiences
Yeah.
in going to all these countries
Yeah.
and staying in people's homes from all these different countries,
Hmm.
not just the country they were in. But we had one boy that stayed, and he said he didn't have a sheet on his bed; it was a tablecloth or something. And this was a ambassador's kid,
Mm.
so he was used to having a nice house and nice
Hmm.
things and all. And he was just miserable. And I said, well, and they couldn't change once they had a home and all this, that they were staying. They couldn't ask to be changed, but he was just so miserable. And I said, well, do you want me to see, because I was there as one of the sponsors, you want me to see if we could do something about it? And he thought about it, and he says, no, he wouldn't do that. So he went in and stuck it out.
Mm.
Well, the next year when we hosted, he came into my office and he says, I want to see who's coming. He wanted to see the list of the ones that are coming, who they would take in their house and all, because the kid that he stayed with in this really bad situation came.
Mm.
And at first he's thinking, I think I'll take him. And then he said, no, I won't. Don't mess with it.
Mm. Wow.
But it was great experiences for the kids. And our kids had friends from Australia and friends from
Yeah.
Israel. And and the Israel kids, when they graduate from high school, they go right back and go into the military.
Mm.
And your children, they all spent the majority of their childhood in Thailand.
In their high school, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they had a
My
positive.
son started the second grade there. He was the youngest,
Mhm.
and the oldest one started her freshman year. So, and other two are in between. We
Okay.
had a second grader, a fourth grader, a seventh grader, and a ninth grader when we
Yeah.
moved in.
And they look back on that time in Thailand.
Yeah, it's
favorably.
very special.
Yeah.
It was. They all played sports, and they all got to go everywhere, and they all did well.
Wow.
And y'all, of
Lots
course,
of friends. They still keep in contact with
and you,
some
of course, continued on in Thailand as they went off and got into careers and marriages and mission work themselves. And
Mhm.
so how much involvement overlap was there with Loren with family life, and how much overlap was there with you and your family in ministry mission work? How much of that was you guys doing together, or how did you
Most
do that?
when he was in Bangkok, most of the time he was gone on weekends, as well as teaching through the week in the school. Then he drove all over the country to visit and teach in villages. and there, back in those days, there was no television, no phones, no communication outside of the city, and even in the city there wasn't much communication.
Wow.
And so one time he didn't come home and know where he was or what, but there was no way he could tell us that the vehicle had broken down. He ended up bringing it home in the back of a big truck, that had the back end, but they didn't have any way to load it in the truck except to put the truck down in the ditch and then push our van into the back of it, and then bring it into Bangkok. And then they took it down to the car place where we bought it. And I happened to be with them that time, and I was a nervous wreck because when they pulled into that back of that company, they didn't have jacks and things like vehicles here where you can raise cars up and down.
Yeah.
It was guys, and they had like about 18 of these Thais that are trying to pull this car out of the back off of this truck and hold on to it, and I just couldn't even look because I just knew that it was going to go one way or the other and fall on them, and somebody'd be hurt, and we'd be sued, and the whole works.
Wow.
But they did it. They did it.
Group effort. Nice.
But that was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Wow. So you originally go over there and work with the church and work with the school.
Mm-hmm.
51 years. I'm sure that your ministry changed
Yes.
over time. So what are some of the moves you saw? How did God work in those,
Well, there were lots of things going, and there were problems. There was dissensions and different, how there always is.
Mm-hmm.
we were in Bangkok 14 years.
Okay.
And during that time, when we had the Bible school, when Larry Henderson, father and mom left, who'd really started that work, and they were great with the language and everything, and Larry had grown up over there. And so Larry and Loren took turns in Bangkok with the school being whoever was the administrator. And the other one went back to the United States for a home leave or whatever. They would take those turns. And then at the end, Larry had decided, and Kelly Davidson they're from A&M, he came over and he did a tremendous job with the music and translating a lot of the devotional songs into Thai, so
Cool.
it was wonderful. And so then Loren decided that he'd like to move out because Larry wasn't going to come back, and there wasn't the interest in having the young men from the villages come into the school. Thailand had gotten so modernized or whatever. They were thinking about their kids going to school, going to university, and getting a job and making money, because they all came from poor villages and farms, and they're thinking that's the only way that they're going to ever have anything. So the school was just not a draw to them like it was in the early days.
Gotcha.
Our blessing in the beginning was they had missionary workshops in the different countries once a year. Everybody goes, so we got to go to the different countries and see what they were doing, how it was doing, and that was a blessing, in Bangkok also. But then, so they did that, and then so we moved south. Loren decided he wanted to move, and there was no church. There was one church in the south that their student had gone through the school in Bangkok, and he had gone down there and gotten married, and they had a church in Songkhla. And so then we moved to Phuket, where one of the big draws was it was an island and it's on the sea, and so we ended up living there. That was after the kids all came back to the United States, the college, and they came back on their own. But we went to Phuket and started the congregation. So several of our student graduates that had gone through the preaching school in Bangkok moved with us.
Wow. Okay. So you guys planted a church in
Phuket, which is a big city, and it was a great place to live, but very difficult for the church because people came and left all the time.
Was it like a tourist destination?
Like 2 million a year.
Wow.
Summertime in planes. Yeah, they're on their third, maybe their fourth international, I think, airport right now that they've built since three since we'd been there. I haven't seen this new one, but they were telling me that they're building a new one there too. And my grandson, and he was there during the tsunami. We were there during the tsunami.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandson came over and went with Loren working with the tsunami and stuff. And he wanted to go back, so he took his 2 children and wife, and they went back, and he loved it, and they lived there for a while. They said, there's no Thais where we live. They're all Russians. The Russians and the Chinese are just coming in and have taken over that part of the world, basically. It was starting before we left, and it's still, I went... Loren and I went with our landlady from Alaska. She wanted to bring her 2 children to Thailand. So we met them at the airport, and we're standing at the airport waiting for their plane to come in. And here are all the Thai girls, and they're speaking Russian. And they've learned the Russian language so that they can tell the Russians when they get off the planes that were coming in that day, which buses to get on and all this kind of thing. And I was in shock. I knew it was happening as we were moving, but I just didn't realize the degree.
Interesting.
And it's happened in Cambodia also. The Chinese came in, they wanted a casino and this and that, and then that didn't work. But in the process, they messed up the whole beach area and, of course, everything with trying to build and then not finishing it. And it's just a disaster.
Wow.
A disaster. You just can't imagine what's going on. Of course, the same thing happened in Laos. When we went to Laos one time, I think it's the only place I've ever been when it was obvious that they didn't like Americans
Mm.
because there were signs and things, and you had to be so careful, And I was surprised, really surprised. Never been where it was that obvious.
Wow.
So you and your family were in Phuket with other preachers and from the school.
No, we started, the couple and her secretary. She'd gone through the school, and her sister and her sister's
that
husband, they
Lek?
graduated. Yeah, Lek,
Okay.
and then Sok and Thai, who are now in northern Thailand. They went back home.
So
And
how long were you in Phuket together, and what was in?
We were in Phuket 20 years.
Okay. And helping plant the church, and then
And
what?
altogether, we were over there 33 years straight.
Wow.
Not counting our time here in Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
And then
where we just half.
so then you went from Phuket to Alaska. Was that where?
Yes.
Okay.
But the reason that happened, I was saying, we didn't plan it that way. We didn't plan on ever leaving Thailand. Lauren didn't say, we had no plans to ever leave it. And but I came back for a baby. One of the girls was having a baby when I came back, and we found out our military friend that we lived across the street with lived here in Alaska.
Hmm.
And so Lauren said we'd stop and he would visit with him and then come on down when the baby was born. And I said, fine. So he did. And this man, Bill Jones, he had the skydiving place here in Palmer and Wasilla. They were using the airports. He said originally they'd looked even at Girdwood and places like that, but because of the weather and the this or that, But he had the skydiving place. So Lauren jumped with him one time when we were here visiting, and when we moved here with our RV, he let us park on their place where they were jumping. They had water, but they didn't have the sewer system. So we were just parked there until we could find where we were going to move our camper there.
Wow.
And that man, and Lauren helped him work with his plane, but he was doing all his own work with his airplane. And you have to do that all the time. And he was older than Lauren, and he just passed away here just a few weeks ago.
Wow.
But they had moved from here then and went Wyoming, Montana, someplace back there I'm not familiar with.
So Lauren came up to visit, and then
I visited
we
with
gotta move
him.
here.
And then, then he decided, this is pretty nice. Well, Lauren missed hunting and fishing. He was an outdoor guy, and he really missed all that. And in Thailand, it was tough. You don't hunt or fish over there. You can fish out in the sea, the bigger.
Yeah.
It's not like what he was used to.
Yeah.
And he kind of missed all that. And so Alaska was and he always loved Alaska.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So that's how that
he
happened.
loved it here. Yeah, he loved it.
So 33 years straight,
Mm-hmm.
and then from then on until
Left
just
it
a
here.
couple years ago, it was
Mm-hmm.
about, was it 6 months? 6 months or?
Well, and when we moved here, then it was 5 and 7 because we wanted to keep we rented. So we needed that PFD to help pay the rent,
Okay.
to keep the house. Otherwise, we'd have had to be looking for a house to rent, and rent's expensive.
Right.
So we just kept the house because it was a sister in Christ to let us rent her house. Fabulous house, fabulous view, and it was a reasonable rate, really cheap actually if you compared it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you would go. So then 5 months.
5 and 7. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. We leave here in October, November, and come back in March so we could apply for the PFD.
And you'd go back to Thailand, and where would you go back to Thailand?
We went back to Phuket, but we went all over. Actually,
Okay.
we went in northern Thailand in the Chiang Mai area, and then we were in Bangkok and in Phuket too.
And you'd go to Cambodia too?
And then we go to Cambodia to see the girls, and he would teach there too.
Gotcha.
And we have kind of a foster son. He's not a foster son as far as the government's concerned, but we had him from the time he was 4.5 years old.
Wow.
And he's married and he's working with the church. The church is really struggling, but even lacking the ties, they keep trying to go down and keep it on its feet.
So what was it like then after being, go ahead.
Before I forget,
Yeah,
actually, I've had four Thai babies besides different situations, but we had eight because his mother, she remarried. She was a Christian to start with, and then she and her husband split up and remarried, and she took the girl and left the boy with her husband, but her husband never ever had a house. He was a night guard and lived in a car. And we said, we'll just keep you. We don't, he doesn't need to be living like that. He needed school. He was a kindergartner. Then we had another girl. We had a baby that I spent the hospital time. She had evidently been raped by a policeman, and she fled from home because she's afraid of the policeman, and she didn't want the parents, didn't want anybody to know that the daughter was in this situation or whatever. So they ended up in Phuket and met one of the Christians, and so they said, what are we going to do? How are we, And we were on our way to a birthday party one night, and we stopped at the hospital to see how this girl was doing. And they were saying somebody has to stay with her because the nurses don't do things. The family member stays, and the nurse is just the go-between between the medicine and the hospitals or anything like that. And I looked around at this group who were in our car going to this birthday party for one of the kids. And I'm the only one that's ever had a baby.
Wow.
So I spent the night in the hospital, and there is 15-bed ward with a wooden chair in between each bed because everybody always has a parent or a friend or somebody, that's there with them. And we just happened to be there when they brought her out of the delivery room with the baby. They carried her in a cot down the stairs, a guy on each end, and took her to this 15-bed ward. And there I was. I thought, what am I going to do with this baby? And I asked them, I said, where do you sterilize? I'm used to military hospitals. Where how are you going to feed the baby? This mother would not look at the baby. She never looked at her, ever, because it was such a terrible situation, for. And so I stayed. I stayed in the hospital the whole time she was there with this baby, and we ended up getting her into a children's home out of Bangkok. And they came down and picked the baby up. But I had the baby the whole time I was in the hospital, and then at our house until they came to get her.
How long was that?
So I don't know now. I can't remember. It was about 3 days from when we got out of the hospital until they came down.
I see.
And took the baby. But I was in the hospital, I think, 5. But I this was a government hospital. This is not a nice hospital. And I said, what am I? They bring the food out and put it on a table outside the main door.
Wow.
And whoever's taking care of the patient and whatever goes out to the door, picks up the tray of food and brings it in and feeds the patient and the baby. And I said, what do I do with the bottles? We had to go that night. They had to go, even after the birthday party, had to go get stuff for the baby because there was nothing. There was no preparation or anything. And that little sink in that nasty bathroom, that was awful. I thought, I don't, after being in military hospitals where you're so controlled,
Right.
It was just unbelievable. But the baby lived through it.
Wow.
So one of your
So I
foster
had
kiddos.
3 or 4. One of them's here in the United States, who graduated from high school, just doing great, and just a couple others were just. That one was adopted by friends that worked with us.
I see.
Yeah.
So looking over 50 plus years of ministry in Thailand and also Alaska, curious for what would you say were some of like the highs, the fruitful times? What would you say like were some of the most fruitful things that God did in 50 plus years?
Oh, wow. There were so many, there's the church has grown so much. There's so many Christian. The summer camp is a fantastic, fruitful situation for the everybody, because that's the only time they get to see everybody and meet everybody, and that's where, and they can hardly wait, to get there, and it's just the teaching's great. So summer camps are always special. And before we got there, that camp, the church in Bangkok, that property belongs to the church, but it's on the sea. So everybody gets to go down to the sea, and that's where they have all those connections from people all over the whole country. Without it, and they look forward to it every year.
Wow.
That's one of the great times. Then we have missionaries had an opportunity once a year to get together in Asia missionary workshops, and they still do that. That was always a big help, and saw other parts of the country, other situations. Got to ride an elephant.
Oh, wow.
Different things like that, that you wouldn't do in Bangkok. Although we had elephants in Bangkok streets when we first got over there, all the traffic.
Uh-huh.
So.
Wow.
And then go ahead.
No, that's good.
And then how much changed, if anything, when you guys started going 5 months, 7 months? Did your guys' ministry change much at that point?
Well, it changed from the time that we had the school and lived in Phuket. And then from then on, we just went everywhere, wherever our preachers and preacher students were. Visited all the, the congregation in Bangkok and the other congregation, which is called Watcherpong. It's also in Bangkok, but different parts. And then in northern Thailand and southern Thailand,
So a lot more travel than.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we always had a reunion and to see with all the guys that went to school, lived with us and went to school, because they were like our kids. Loren was like a father to them, and one of the boys was telling me that, that was the most wonderful time in his whole life. He learned, getting to learn how to scuba dive, getting to go to the sea and getting to do things that they would have never, not. And he was one that Loren sent home from school. He got kicked out of school because he wasn't obeying the laws, the rules.
Wow.
And he went home and they're farming and doing all this stuff, and he decided school's not too bad.
Wow. So he was a father figure.
So he was. And when we moved, when we got ready to come to the States, they called me one day. I'm upstairs and unpacking and getting ready to move, and I didn't know what they were. And they down, because we had the building where we had the classroom, everything together, And they were, each of them was really telling Loren and what the school meant to them and what they done in there, all crying. And I'm all crying. 3 hours we cried.
Wow, man.
It was the hardest thing I've ever been through. And I didn't even know they were going to do it. They called me and said, come down. And I'm saying, because I just thought, well, they're just going to tell Loren, thank you, and I'll go ahead with this. And they're saying, no, come down. And we bawled for 3 hours.
Wow.
I'm serious. It was the hardest thing. And then they've had a reunion ever since. When we go back, just them. Because that was just like family.
Yeah.
They lived with us and they grew up together because they were young guys.
Wow.
That's
beautiful.
But they're preaching. They're all,
Wow.
It's just great to see.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
So there was so
God
much.
works in so many ways, you know.
So there was so much like regional fellowship amongst the leaders in the church there, and still is in Thailand.
There is now, you know, because all these kids that have come in from all these villages,
Mm-hmm.
you know, ended up going back
That's amazing.
to the different places,
Wow.
and some of them gone home, you
Mhm.
know, and it's. And some of them are working in Bangkok now, you know,
Yeah.
both in the big churches. So,
Yeah. So when you're going back and forth for, I mean, full time 33 years and then back and forth 5 and 7, um, you know, you're spending so much time with the churches there and preachers there around Thailand. Then you spend 7 months here with the church in the valley, but also churches around the state in Alaska. What was that like going back and forth between, I mean, in some cases it's, I mean, opposite ends of the world, very different, but yet one church. What was that experience like adjusting away from full-time Thai to getting to know the churches in Alaska?
you know, I don't.
Going to Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart.
Oh, when we came back from Walmart, the first time I never heard of a Walmart superstore.
Oh,
And Loren was going to a preacher's meeting in Abilene
hmm
with the preacher. We were in Midland at the time. And I said, that's all right. Just take me to Walmart. And when you come back from the preacher's meeting, you can come pick me up. And they said, but, you know, that's a long time. But I'd already been to Walmart and noticed that they had a McDonald's in there. So I knew I'd have a place I could have lunch. And I spent from 8 o'clock that morning until 5 o'clock that night in Walmart. I never did anything but look at every single thing in the whole store, and I was as happy as I could be. I'm not kidding.
That's amazing.
I never saw a superstore before. And we were over there where you didn't see anything from them. And you come back to visit family or this or that. You don't have time to just go look. Lauren's not a shopper, so he's not going to look.
Wow.
And I looked at everything. I mean, even the tools, you name it. I looked at everything in that store that whole day and was perfectly happy.
That's so funny. Wow.
But I
So,
didn't have those things
yeah,
over there,
yeah.
you know.
Wow.
So it was
So,
nice.
so coming up here, I mean, you guys have been super connected to the Valley Church.
Oh, yeah. This has been such a blessing. And the funny thing, we didn't know where, we thought we'd be in Anchorage.
Okay.
Even though we were living here, I figured we'd have to go to church in Anchorage. And we had our RV on the jump out there at the jump place, and we just happened to be on the highway and go by the church building. There's a sign that says, you know, Church of Christ.
Mhm.
I said, Lauren, look, there's a church right there. We don't have to go to Anchorage.
Wow.
And that's what we did. That Sunday, we went into that, and that the rest is history.
Wow.
Church signs do work.
Yeah. Location. And
That's right.
God uses that.
Because otherwise, we would have been driving back and forth,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow.
And so
Well, it's
that's
just
how we got here.
it's just amazing to think about one of the things that Mike and I have enjoyed on this podcast is talking to other people in Alaska about their faith and just seeing the faith of the church. But seeing your guys' influence on the state of Alaska and then sharing time in Thailand, it's just beautiful to see that faith doesn't have boundaries and that the church is
Absolutely, yeah.
so big.
Everywhere, yeah.
Wow.
Just amazing. Amazing.
So thinking back to seeing the celebration of the end of World War II and now here to
That's how old I
2025,
Mhm.
God has brought you through so much,
Yeah.
and He has worked through you and your family in
Yeah.
phenomenal ways. What's some experience or wisdom you would like to share with moms, wives, families, as things that you've seen as like, here's some important things in life? What would you say would be some of those things?
Why, there's so much. I feel so blessed, but I was not prepared for any of it. and still don't feel very confident about many things. You just learn as you go, and
Mm.
I think it's really important that you have good communications and with your husbands and wives, and then with the kids, and encouraging the kids. It's a wonderful experience for them. But I don't know, Lauren and I both grew up with strange experiences all over, and then our kids have kind of grown up that way,
Hmm.
and so. But it's such a wonderful experience for the kids.
Yeah.
To
And
grow up on a
especially
mission field.
to grow up, with all these different Christians in different places, and get to learn all these things. I don't think our kids would change it for the world. And their dad was gone a lot, even at that,
Hmm.
but it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing, and the more I realize it after going through a million boxes in this move. But I wouldn't change it for the world.
You didn't
But
feel
God,
prepared, but
no,
God took you.
never been prepared.
But God
And
took
I'm
you.
still not. That's the reason, I was thinking people think I'm strange, I guess, when we get ready to leave here, and I look out at everybody that's blessing us, I, that have been so good to us and are saying a prayer for us at the Valley. And there's this whole group that are so loving and have done so much for us. It is just, and I just can't help but cry.
Mhm.
I don't, God has just blessed us in so many ways with so many people, and I can't explain it. I really can't explain it.
Mhm.
And when I go back to Thailand, it's the same way. They want me to stay, and I could have stayed, and it would have been wonderful.
Sure.
And they're having a reunion like I always had with Loren this summer. Like wrote and said, "We want you to come when we figure out when we're going to have it. We'll send you the date." And I would love to go, but I don't know that physically. I don't know that I'll be able to make that trip.
Mhm.
So we'll just see what God has planned for it, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's been a great blessing,
Mm.
great blessing. And I feel like my blessings, even in the early years as a kid, uh, before I was a member of the church, but I believed in God and had godly upbringing.
Mhm.
I feel all of that has been such a blessing in my
Wow.
life. But what I'm going through now and seeing kids and what they've written and what they've done, that we have, boxes and boxes of souvenirs that we haven't seen, and not souvenir things from country, but from the kids, the blessings. It's just unreal,
Wow.
unreal. But it's all God.
That's right.
Mhm.
Why God chose me, why Loren chose me, I have no idea, because we didn't grow up in the same towns. We didn't know each other. And I don't know. It's
Mhm.
all God.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's all God.
But every time we get ready to go to Thailand, I was exhausted. You saw me. never have it all together, all
Yeah.
the packing. It's
Mhm.
hard. So that's what I'd say was, you just do the best you can, and God brings all kinds of blessings out of it.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, you are a huge inspiration to us, and I know
Yeah.
to many others,
Mhm.
and because you serve a good God and you're very
Absolutely.
transparent with how great He is, and
Mhm.
your confidence of overcoming that feeling of not wanting to do something, but then still
Not being
doing it
prepared.
anyways.
Yes.
That's faith.
Yeah.
You're a great woman of faith, and
That's right.
we're very blessed by your example, and you have extraordinarily been a light to us. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, let me say, both of you are just such an example to me and such an encouragement. And I'm still learning, I'm still learning so much. And I see your wives and see, I've heard, how you're doing with your kids. It's something I can't even explain to you. And you wouldn't believe me if I explained it.
Well, I think of Psalm 1 and with this conversation, and particularly of this tree that's planted by streams of water. And in verse 3 about the idea of the fruit from this tree, that it bears fruit in its season, his leaves do not wither. And you and Loren and your family, you've had different seasons of life, whether it's school or farm or military or Thailand or Alaska. There's different seasons of life, and there's been fruit, very abundant fruit that from each of those seasons, and there's not been a withering of it. And I find that to be a really tangible example of what 80 plus years of life in the Lord looks like. And I'm just trying to think 80 years from now, someone who is being influenced by a little girl bringing them talking about the Bible, and in that feeling of not being prepared but still going for it, and that mustard seed of faith and all the mountains that have been moved around from that is exciting to see, and that these aren't just ideas. This is a very real way of life, and abundant life. And so we hope to hear more from you in the future. And we love you, Penny. We thank God for you, and thank you so much for jumping in with us here.
Yeah, thank you.
I love you both too, and your families, and the church here. Which is why I'm here.
Yeah.
Yep, God knew what he was doing when brought you guys up here, and so thankful for you, Penny.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being part of this episode. We love you. Pray for us, and we'll see you guys next time.